Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Kickstarter GG, and today I bring you a flintlock fantasy in a world gripped by tyranny, where you play as a dog called Duke. This project came onto my radar as a result of a developer reaching out and asking if I check it out, and I've done so. So I wanted to put this video together, share my thoughts with you all. Let's explore how the Kickstarter page is structured and whether this project is actually worth backing. We are kicking off with what Hounded is and what its inspirations are. Hounded is described as a dog adventure game that is in a flintlock fantasy world that is gripped by tyranny. Players assume the role of Duke, who is a border collie searching for their lost master, who is the leader of the rebellion. The opening section of the Kickstarter page is further expanded on further down as we progress through the page, but it basically details that the story is one of love, loss, hope, and determination, and it starts with Duke's life breaking into chaos as a blaze breaks out, caused by the oppressive regime. Consequently, Duke is separated from his master, leaving him lost and alone. Duke has to venture deep into an unknown world and territory, and through the use of his skills, like picking up scents, these lead him to a quaint English village called Tideswell. On his journey, Duke will meet a host of allies and enemies, as well as uncover secrets and a series of supernatural abilities due to his connection to an energy source called the Tide. As Duke ventures forth, the player will be faced with puzzles and challenges where you'll have to outsmart your opponents in order to proceed. The Kickstarter specifically details that the world is inspired by 18th century Britain and the historical context of the nation being gripped by preparation for invasion by an oppressive regime. The project page alludes to a variety of environments which we may encounter on our journey throughout the game, and highlights that the game has a focus on the early adoption of electricity and explores themes of pollution and environmental damage. Additionally, they are taking iconic British imagery and items that you would see, like the phone booth, post boxes, streetlights, etc., and they're being used and twisted into tools of communication and control, and this theme runs throughout the game. Moving swiftly on, let's explore their goals and the financial breakdowns. Firstly, it's nice to see there are stretch goals, but that these have been cut short to avoid additional page padding, while subtly making it clear that there's potentially more stretch goals if they get a bit further down the line. However, the lack of a financial breakdown is really disappointing and a huge misstep. I understand that they do specify funding is to help people go full-time on this project and thus speed up bringing the project to life, but this really should have been included for both the sake of transparency and to ensure that those pitching in to fund the project have a reasonable set of expectations of where their money is going. There is not really much else I can say in regard to this matter, but the information being missing and more explicitly elaborated upon is rather disappointing to see in a Kickstarter page. Next up is visual design, and on this note, the game appears to have a very dark and oppressive visual tone, and this aligns very much with the themes previously mentioned. I noticed from the art on the page that the aesthetic is grounded in a level of realism, but there is more supernatural elements, especially what with things like the tools of propaganda and power, and these are in contrast to the environment, what with having a very luminous and vibrant colouring. This creates an element of dissonance in what is visually experienced, and it plays well into the themes. Overall, I really like it, and it'll be interesting to see how far they go with this visual design and whether it evolves and changes depending on where the player is in the story and potentially the emotional tone of situations. From the page, it is clear that some placeholder assets are there and there's some temporary textures in place, so clearly there's still a lot of work to go with this part of the game, as well as specific modelling of objects. Moving on, let's explore the narrative design. The deeper part of the story section conveys the tone well and is tastefully done with short paragraphs and illustrative images. This gives a reasonable expectation of the narrative specifically. The section on the world further builds upon the story section with additional details, specifically about the 18th century Britain inspiration, as well as the historical context of the nation being gripped by invasion by an oppressive regime. The section alludes to the variety of environments we may encounter on our journey throughout the game, and it also highlights that the game has a focus on the early adoption of electricity and explores the themes of pollution and environmental damage. It's going to be interesting to see how this evolves throughout the gameplay and how the player will discover this information, what will being a dog. Hopefully it won't be too absurd or specifically lots and lots of lore dumping. I would rather see them go into discovery of information through showing rather than telling. It would be nice for it to evolve and be demonstrated in a natural way rather than an unnatural dump method. What's clear is the developers are going to have to be really careful with how the story is developed and conveyed, otherwise they're going to risk crippling this game. Onwards to gameplay, and I have to highlight and appreciate the gameplay section has some details and is going into it in a way that isn't too bloated and over the top. I tend to find with Kickstarter games that this information either gets omitted entirely, they skate around being too specific, or they don't shut up and it drags on forever. Very few seem to strike the balance right, and in this particular instance they give the information in a nice visual way and explains more specifically around how the magical elements are going to fit into the gameplay in the form of a force called the Tide, and what this will ultimately mean for progression and new ways in which you can experience the world. This is super vital in a game like this, where you're blending realistic worlds with something a bit more supernatural, and this can be a challenge. Making it feel like it fits is going to be super important, but what little information we do have, it seems to suggest that this has been relatively well thought out, and this should come through well in the implementation. The GIFs in the section show nice, clear game in action, and they demonstrate a few key things like visuals, traversal, several game mechanics. I appreciate that they're not hiding this. They actually have something to show. Additionally, the developer further adds to mechanical and explorative details, and we find out that technology is specifically going to be very crucial. Duke, on his journey, will be able to interact with experimental technology, and in doing so, solve problems. This is going to enable you to navigate the world in new ways. Again, this should create some interesting form of interplay and open additional opportunities for layering mechanics and complexity as the game progresses, which should help prevent the experience becoming stale. Next, onto your variety of backing options, and without sounding like a total nitpicker, but this has really annoyed me. There's no grid breaking down the backing options, and this would have been really useful. Not having this feels like a huge misstep, and it's frankly frustrating. I do, however, acknowledge that this would have been complicated by the fact that they have a lot of optional extras that are possible at each stage, and these also vary, but this could have been detailed as a cliff note at the end of the graphic, so at least users could have found a price point with perks at the core of what they really wanted to get to, before refining it down further via the page tiers on the right. I can see people, due to the lack of the simplified breakdown, being really put off. I really hope it doesn't do this, as the game seems really promising, but I do feel this was a major failure not to at least have something to make the comparison a lot easier. We're nearly at the bottom of the Kickstarter page, and we finally get to meet the team. The section features a lovely showcase of who makes up the team, and it includes some little photos, which is a lovely personal touch. However, it does not go into much depth with regards to who these people are, other than their role in the project. It would have been nice to see a little bit of flavour text about each person and their specific expertise, as this helps build credibility. There is a small visual below the team photos which shows box art of games, but we don't know the details of which people worked on what, where, to what extent, etc., which kind of renders this a little bit useless, or at least very limited in its usefulness for those that are considering backing, so a little more context and information would have been useful here. To round out the campaign page, the team acknowledges there will be risks and challenges with the project, and specifically highlights that a lack of time is really slowing down production. The team aims, with the support of people on Kickstarter, to be able to shift things from a part-time to a full-time production situation. They acknowledge that there are technical issues and that bugs are possible, and this could really severely derail the project timeline. Additionally, they acknowledge that creating a narrative-rich game is very time and resource intensive, and therefore lots of refinement is to be expected, and this of course comes with the negative effect of potential delays. They make it clear that they've been able to operate up to this point in a responsible manner with a limited budget, and very much intend to be thoughtful, which is lovely to hear. And specifically with regards to supporters, they intend to give regular updates regarding progress to ensure trust and transparency is maintained. This is wonderful. I feel their assessment here is very reasonable and grounded in reality, given the types of projects given the type of project they are building. I don't see any obvious red flags in terms of their expectations or omission of obvious risk factors. So I think all in all, good here. Looking at the Kickstarter from a more broad presentation perspective, it's clear that the campaign is very visually cohesive, which is a great starting point. Additionally, the campaign is reasonable length, it's not overly worded, it's not super padded, but the GIFs and images do pad it a little bit. But this leans into an approach of showing rather than excessively describing, and I think this overall works really well. The opening paragraph sets the scene in a clear and concise way, and I appreciate the immediate inclusion of socials and their product page. This is well executed and acts as a great hook to make the viewer want to read on, so all in all they've done well in this regard. Attention to detail has clearly been paid to certain aspects like the story and the game mechanics, but other sections like funding breakdowns, backing options, the team, etc. really could do with a bit more attention and time and love being spent on them. In conclusion, the campaign has had an amazing start, with it reaching a funding goal in just 4 days, and 88% of that was just in a single day. I believe the Kickstarter is fairly cohesive, and although they don't have a demo, they've been able to show certain aspects in action, which is really important. They show the concept becoming a reality, and most importantly demonstrate there has been some progress and a baseline on which everything is being built. There is something tangible already there. This is also cohesive with their narrative that the project has been in development in a part-time capacity and that the Kickstarter is going to give it that push into full-time production. They are clearly doing the groundwork with getting it on people's radar, and this is most certainly helping them with reaching and surpassing their funding goal as well, which is awesome to see. There are many animal-focused games out there, of which we've recently seen quite a few that are parkour-driven, for example like Barkour. This game feels like it's heavier on the adventure and puzzle-solving side and will likely be more akin to an experience like Stray. I think Hounded has a unique identity and has the potential to do enough to stand out and make its own mark in the market. To achieve this, however, it's going to need to be mechanically in-depth and tell a really compelling story with its own twists and turns to really capture the imagination of its audience and play into the intense gravity of the core themes. I like the proposed core themes as well. They're a really good choice and the tone fits well with these. I think it's going to make for an interesting experience, especially when combined with the proposed core gameplay loop. I just hope that they have been thoroughly planning how elements will interact so systems can develop alongside the story, and in doing so evolve and consequently not get stale. Likewise, the ever-present looming threats and ensuring those continue to feel imposing will be important in maintaining the emotional stakes and keeping the audience engaged. This is, in my opinion, a clear case where enabling the player to become too powerful could really take away from the overall experience, so this is something they're going to need to carefully manage. I like the art and the visual direction, but there's clearly a lot of work that has to be done in this regard, as they have acknowledged on their own page that there's a lot of placeholder materials still. The scope of the project seems reasonable for the size of the team they have, but I do dislike the lack of specificity with regards to the team expertise and the lack of detail regarding how the funds are going to be used, other than the fact that it's very broadly mentioned that it's to push things from part-time to full-time. I do hope they consider updating the Kickstarter page to give a little bit more information in a concise way in regards to this. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and please do go make sure to check out the Kickstarter link in the video description if you want to back their project or learn more. If you've enjoyed today's video, please do consider subscribing, liking the video, and letting me know your thoughts in the comments. All the best to the developers.